the best base configuration ever. When I was 16 years old, I got my first flat tire. Now, this being my first flat tire, and my parents kind of missing that memo on letting me know what to do, I just had no idea. I just pulled over to the side of the road and sat there. And this is in an era before cell phones were in everybody's hands. I couldn't just say, Siri, what do I do when I get a flat tire? So I'm scratching my head. I'm like, well, maybe I walk to a gas station. There'll be a payphone. And just about the time I'm getting out of my car, a police officer pulls up behind me. And I'm like, oh, great. So I run in his car. And this is also an era where you could run over to a police car and they're like, get down. So this was like everybody smiling, right? And I'm like, I got a flat tire. And I still remember he's like, I can see that. And I'm like, I don't know what to do when I get a flat tire. And he goes, well, let me tell you. And so this guy, he never touched a tool. He never did anything himself at all. He just said, do this, do that. And for the next 30 minutes, I changed the tire on my car, and I felt like that when I was said and done. I'm like, I am awesome. I am a mechanic. I can, and I'm just like, oh, I can't wait to tell everybody that I changed this flat tire. And so it was then that I learned apprenticeship is one of the best things that you can do. And so as we're getting into this Cisco education world, and you're getting into Cisco devices, I thought, you know what? Let's just take it all off for a moment. Let's move aside from, here's what you type when you do this and all that. I just want to be like, okay, you get a new router. What do? You get a new switch. What do you do? Let me walk you through it. And here's what I want you to do. I want you to go through this nugget 3 times. Seriously. First time, just watch. Just watch what I do. You're going to be like, I kind of see that. The second time you go through, I want you to take notes. So don't do anything on a router yet. Just kind of start jotting down all these commands that I'm telling you, because for you certification folks, this is all very test relevant. But I'm also want to talk to people that just want to do this in the real world. This is all real world applicable. So this is a great time where it all comes together. The third time you watch it, I want you to do it. Literally, do what I'm doing. Set up a router to where you start getting ninja level skills at doing this, and you're going to be like, man, I'm awesome. So I'm going to pre-warn you. I haven't recorded this yet, so I have a feeling it's going to be a little longer of a nugget, but it's going to be so good. I'm going full screen with you so we can stay in this interface the whole time. This is a factory default router. The only thing that I've done is answered no to that question that says, do you want to enter the initial config dialog? We saw that when we went through a couple nuggets ago where I cleared the configuration and showed what happened afterwards. All right? So I'm going to press enter to get started. I'm sitting there in user mode. First thing I'm going to do, go into global config mode. Config T, and I'm going to change the host name. So at some point you would have a host name that you would pick for this device. Now there's many different mindsets around this. Some people say, well, this will be B1 dash 1F dash 2R dash in some code name where they're like, okay, this means building 1, floor 1, switch 1, or in the second rack. And I have seen white papers written on large companies naming conventions where every letter means something and it's deep and meaningful. For me, I'm like, Neo. That's going to be the name of the switch. And as long as you document well, Neo is fine. Morpheus, Trinity, they can all jump in on this game. And you can set up superhero networks and comic books and all. There's no right answer. The only right answer is that you document so when somebody logs into Neo, they know where they are. Next, we got to cover ourselves legally. See, here's the deal. When somebody logs into our device, it says, hey, the console is now available. And in our world that we live in, where there's lawyers who love eating up those kind of things, people are like, oh, well, you said it was available, so this hacker that got in and destroyed your information and stole all of your data, he was under the impression that by saying it was available or saying welcome when he logged in, so I'm dead serious. There is court cases where major offenses have been let off because we didn't have a proper logon banner. So get into global configuration mode. I'm going to type in banner MOTD. What does that mean? message of the day. So that means it's actually an old Linux terminal. No matter how you access this device, whether you telnet into it, SSH into it, log in through the console, you're going to see this logon banner. There's many different banners you can configure. You can see when I hit the question mark, there's logon banners, there's incoming. But message of the day, the beauty of it is it catches everything. And then notice I hit the question mark, the most confusing context-sensitive help in the world. C, banner text C, where C is the delimiting character. What does that mean? Whenever you see line or word in all capitals, they're like, you could type in whatever you want. Here's the general syntax. Essentially, this signals the start and end of your banner text. So C being a delimiting character, I can make up whatever character I want. So I could do caret, do not log on, caret. Right? So this is the beginning of the message. This is the end of the message. That's how it knows when I'm done. So now I hit enter and I hit Control Z, back out, exit out of this device, hit the enter key. Well, it's at the end, but you get the idea, right? Exit out, wait a minute, enter key, do not log on. I don't know if that'll cover you in court. There's actually, if you go on the web and search for logon banners that are legally binding, you can find all kinds of stuff. Other people draw ASCII art of little men with swords, all kinds of different ways. Let me show you one other thing. Banner MOTD, watch this. I could say, let's just go ampersand. That'll be my delimiting character. And then I can hit the enter key. And the beauty is now it's saying, okay, you've started and now you're like in this little text editor, right? I can be like, die. What am I doing? I keep going, little stars and everything. And then how do you think I get out of here? Bam. Done. Ampersand ends the message. Now, I've got to change that at some point. I hit their enter key and I will see die. Do not log in. Something to that nature. Okay, so we've set our banner message. Now let's talk about the console port. I'm going to do a show run. Now, you've seen this show running config multiple times. It shows all the configuration that's on our device. One of the things I love doing, because I'm kind of lazy, I don't want to scroll through it, is I use show running config pipe. I know some of you are like, where'd you find that on the keyboard? What? Huh? The pipe symbol is actually a filter where you can then say, I want to include, or I want to start from, or I want to see the section. This is my favorite right here. The section of command that deals with, for instance, I might say, I want to see the line VTY. So I could do something like this. Watch. Show running config, section, line VTY, and I hit the enter key, and it comes up and says, let me show you all the commands in the line VTY section. So you can see it pulls that little piece out of there. I could do show running config, section, interface, right? And what it will do is filter the running config and just show me the sections of config that start with the command interface and all the subcommands under there. You could do something like include. Let me show you the difference. You saw right up here. I could say include if I want to say lines that match. Watch. Let me show you the difference. Hit the up arrow and change section to include, right? Watch what happens. Instead of showing all of the data underneath, it just says, I'm just going to match the lines that have the word interface in them. So now I'm not seeing the section. See the difference? I'm just seeing that. So a lot of times, rather than just doing a show run and trolling through, I mean, right now it doesn't seem like much, but as you get into big routers, you could have 20, 30 pages of configuration and like, how do I filter this? So those really help out a bunch. All right, so I went and paused and got a nice boring logon banner. Banner, MOTD, exclamation point, and I'll just paste that bad boy right in there, exclamation point. So now we've got, some legally covering words that we can use. That's a very, very simple one. Okay, so logon banner's done. Let's talk about the console port. So the console port is represented by that line console 0, right? When we looked at the running configuration a moment ago, you can see there it is, and there's no configuration underneath it. So the console port provides wide open access to this device, as it should out of the box, but you may want to secure it, or you may not want to. Here's what I mean. You've got you've got a rack of equipment with all these devices sitting in there that's behind a closed, locked door. By the way, if somebody can physically get to your devices, all your security is gone because they can do whatever they want. So this should be secured, little, cameras sitting up there, all recording, all that kind of stuff. So you can lock down the console port that it requires a password. You will fail a security audit if you don't do that. However, I've had companies yell at me for locking down the console port because something's been down. They come running through. Unfortunately, their network documentation isn't up to date. They're like, oh, they plug in and they're like, what's the password? And they come back to me and they go, why did you put a password on the console port? Because if we're there, obviously we could break into the device. So you see where I go. And I always say, well, you'll fail a security audit if you don't. So it's up to you if you want to set a password. Let me show you. It's actually 2 commands, right? I'm going to say password and whatever I want the password to be. Notice it's given me a couple options. I'll talk about those in just a second, but primarily it's just saying line. What is your clear text password? So I'll say Cisco. This is not a good security practice, but it'll prove the point. Now, notice right now I'm going to do show run. I'll do that pipe section, and we'll do a line console 0. Well, let's just do line con, right? And that will now spit out the only thing that's under there, line console 0, password Cisco. So, okay, I'll exit out. No password. Why is that? There's the second command. I'm going to go into line console 0 and type in the command login. That means require logins to this device. Right? Without having that command, it's not going to prompt you for the password. So now I'll exit out and hit the enter key. And now it's saying, here's your login manager. What's your password? Login required. So here's a trick question. You may see this on the exam. You may not. Wait, I can't say that. Hypothetical, bizarre world exam. Okay. Covered. No login. What do you think happens? An exam question might say, no logins are allowed to this because it seems very logical in our human language. But remember, I told you the function of the no command, it negates things, right? So what that's saying is no login is required. So the fact is now anybody, if I type in exit on that console port, anybody can log in without using a password. So no login from a human language sounds like no logins are allowed, but from a router speak, means no logins are required. One more side note on this. I'm going to do a show. Oh, I've got it. Okay. Hang on. Show run. And I'm going to scroll all the way to the bottom of this configuration where you'll see the console port, but you'll also see below it, you see there's my 2 commands. You'll see below it line VTY 0/4. We haven't talked about those yet, but those are your telnet and SSH ports. So if you want to remotely manage this device, and you all do because you don't want to be standing next to it all the time, you will telnet or SSH into this device. Notice what's unique. It has a login command under there, but no password. And if somebody, let's say you put an IP address on this router and before it's ready, somebody tries to break into the router, if they telnet or SSH, it will actually give you the exact message. It says login required, but no password set. Disconnect. So that's a security feature of Cisco, is that out of the box, these routers and switches have logins required under the V2I port, but no password, so nobody can log in remotely until you actually set a password. Now let me fix something that's been annoying me this whole time. I almost did just a moment ago. Have you noticed when I'm sitting here in global config and I hit Control-Z and exit out, I'm like, okay, let's do a show run. Oh, what happened? I got this message right here that's like, hey, you configured, just FYI, so like somebody configured this device, but the problem is it cut what I'm typing in half. So I've got show and now I'm typing, right, and I'm like, is that working? What? And then you're like, no. And then you're deleting the message and you're like, what's going on? That's because they don't have what's called synchronous logging happening on this device. So I'm going to go into the console port, line console 0, right? And type in logging synchronous. Now watch what happens. I'm going to hit Control-Z, type in show run. Oh, don't you feel a peace in your soul? It repainted what I was typing right below that. So the message came through, that's all good, but it repainted what I was typing underneath. The fact is, you could type, at the end of the message and it would work just fine. It really throws you off if you're trying to read it. Now let's get back to those VTY ports. You probably are wondering, what's up with the line VTY 0/4? Well, out of the box, most Cisco devices allow you to have up to 5 telnet sessions or 5 SSH sessions at the same time into this device. Now, You might wonder, well, why would I have a device where 5 different people are telnetted in and managing it? Well, it could be a couple of reasons. One, it could be a big router that's supporting many sites and you have multiple administrators. 2, you could have monitoring equipment. Let's say this is a monitoring server up here that every 60 seconds logs in and does some show commands to see if anything has changed on that router or to collect information. So more than just human beings log in and manage these things. So they give you multiple VTY lines to support that. So you could actually, if you really wanted to, set a different password on every single VTY line. So let me show you. I'm going to go into global config, line VTY 0, right? And I could say the password is Cisco. And then I'll exit out, line VTY 1. And I'll say the password here is Apple. And I could go down the list, and let me just do a show run, and I'll hit pipe section VTY. Right? Show me all the sections of config that have VTY in it. And it spits out right there. Notice I've got all of this. What's the problem with doing this? Think of yourself. You're sitting out there in your beach house in Hawaii because you've struck it rich in your network management and you're telnetting into a device across the internet. Do you know which VTY line you land on? No. This is kind of like the first one that comes in gets VTY 0, next person gets VTY 1. There's no way of specifying a line to land on. So you'd be like, let me guess, and go in there. So most people go in, and let's revert that. I'll do line VTY 0, no password. Line VTY 1, no password. And then I'll do line, and now you see what it's there for, right? Line VTY 0 space 4. What does that do? All 5 of them are configured at the same time, and now I can do password Cisco, and that will be applied to every single one of those. So you never have a different password that's in there. I've seen, it put it at the end right here, but I've seen some places that will actually leave a different password on the last VTY line, because one of the hacking methods is if you figure out somebody's password, you can actually telnet into all 5 lines really quick so somebody can't come in and disconnect you and change the password, right? So some people will say, okay, well, line VTY 4, the last one, I'll have a different password on, but I'm kind of like, the guy just hacked into your router. You've got bigger problems, and I wouldn't worry about setting a different password on the last VTY line. Now let's give an interface an IP address. I'm going to do a show IP interface brief. Great command. Allows you to see all the interfaces on your router. And notice all of these interfaces. I got fast Ethernet 0, fast Ethernet 1, serial 00. And keep in mind, we're in the base configuration stage. Normally you don't assign IP addresses as part of the base configuration because they're all different. I just want to introduce the concept, get you thinking about it. So maybe this connects to the inside of my network. This connects to the ISP, maybe my DSL connection or cable modem connection at home or something like that, right? And we're routing between those two. So how do I give them IP addresses? I'm going to go into global configuration mode. That's my first step. Step into the global room. Then interface fast Ethernet 0/0. And I'll say IP address, and this is where we configure the IP addresses. So if I'm in a house environment, I might say this one's 192.168.0.1 as my router. That's the subnet mask. Exit out of there. Interface fast Ethernet 0/1, and this would be the Cox. Well, Cox. I'm talking about my local service provider, Cox, CenturyLink, AT&T, Sprint, whatever carrier you're using. Then I would say, well, I would either assign the public IP address, or I might just say IP address DHCP, because a lot of times the internet carrier, so this would be a diagram, something like this. Here's my house right there, my router's embedded in the attic, comes down here. This is 192.168.0.1, and then right here connects off to the ISP, and they're going to give me via DHCP, Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol, a public IP address that my router now gets. So that would allow me to get it, but the problem is nothing works yet. So I'm going to do a show IP interface brief. I now see the IP address underneath here. That's great, but I see the status is administratively down. I'm getting a little ahead, but that's all right. I'm going to go into there and do a command called no shutdown. Every interface, let me scroll up here when I did the show run. Every interface out of the box on Cisco devices is shut down. That keeps them from having network activity before you've configured them. So on a router, now on a switch, that's different. A switch, all the interfaces are up by default, but on a router, they're all shut down. So I went in there and I said, okay, I'm going to change the state to up. I'll hit Control-Z, show IP interface brief. I now see I've got the IP address. The status is up, but the protocol, it's called the line protocol. The protocol is down. What does that mean? Oh, two different statuses. This is physical layer of the OSI model. We're physically okay. This is the data link layer, meaning I'm not plugged into anything. So I'm currently down. More on that when we get into the interfaces and setting IP addresses and designing networks later on in the series. I just for now wanted to show you how to give it an IP address and bring the interface up. Okay, just a few more things to add to this base configuration recipe. Let's say I'm sitting right here and I say, yodel, if that would even be how you spell it, and I hit the enter key. What's happening right now? And you'll see this when you start doing it on your lab equipment. You'll eventually mistype something, and you'll be stuck here. You're like, what's going on? Well, anytime you're in privilege mode and you type in a command that doesn't exist, it thinks you're actually trying to telnet to a device named yodel or whatever this strange word I typed in here is. So it's saying, okay, well, in terms of network connectivity, I must have to go to a DNS server and look up what IP address yodel, how did I spell it? Something like that. Yodel is. So DNS server, please tell me. But all of a sudden the router realizes, well, I don't have a DNS server configured. So you know what? I'm just going to start broadcasting. This is a broadcast IP address. Hello, yodel. It's a very appropriate network. Who is yodel? And it's just broadcast, and you're stuck. You didn't want to be stuck. So you have to wait for this all to time out. So how do you fix that? Go into global configuration mode and type in no IP domain -lookup. Enter. Just like it sounds, what did it do? It tried to do a domain name service, DNS lookup, right? So now if I go back and hit the up arrow and say yodel, it's like, I don't know what you're talking about. Right? So much faster. I'm just trying to save you pain if you mistype something and you're not stuck there for 30, 60 seconds waiting for it to time out. All right, we're feeling pretty good. Got a fairly decent base configuration. We're looking at it, feeling positive. We see the host's name. We see, hit the space bar on the keyboard. By the way, a lot of these are default commands that just show up here. I see there's my no IP domain lookup, so I don't have to wait if I mistype something. I've given an IP address. This one is not shut down. Why? Because I don't see the shutdown command. Notice sometimes the commands disappear when they're not there. So the fact is, if I don't see the shutdown command, I have to assume that this interface is active right here on Fastune. I've given an IP address. Hit the space bar. I see we didn't do anything there. I see the logon banner right there. And it translated, it always does, is it takes whatever delimiting character you put in there. I put an exclamation point or an ampersand, and it changes it to Control C. That's just what the router does as the beginning and end character. I set the password on there. I did logging sync. I log in, and what are you doing? What are you doing looking over my shoulder right now? Who walked into this room? Hang on, I moved my mouse. Who walked into this room and now sees all of my passwords over my shoulder? That's not good, right? This is dangerous because somebody could walk in as you're looking at your configuration. We thought he was an accountant, but really he's a black hat hacker, and he just got the passwords, keys to the kingdom. So go into global configuration mode and type in service password encryption. Some of you are like, whoa, what how did we call it pattern interrupt here at CBT Nuggets? Just changing the pace. So I'm going to scroll down to the very bottom, and now you can see all those passwords are gobbledygook. Now, don't get a full security of service password encryption. This is a very weak encryption. You could actually take this. Well, let me show you. Pull open Firefox. I haven't even pre-rehearsed this. I'm going to type in crack Cisco password. And let's just see if we can do it. There's a nice little tool right there. Let's see if this has one. Great. So I'm going to go, let's go back to my password, and I'll grab this guy, copy it to my clipboard, come back over here to, the encrypted version is this, and submit that guy. Yeah, it's not good. But the beauty is at least we've hidden the password from view. It's going to be a lot harder for somebody to remember that than it would be Cisco. Okay, I told you that was the last one, but I've got one more command. It's a really important one to show you, and that is protecting the transition. Oh, not disconnect. Disable. Protecting the transition from user mode to privilege mode, or some people call it enable mode. This right here, when I type in enable, that's not good. There's two ways to protect it. One is by using the enable secret command, and that's the way you want to remember, that's the way you want to know. So I'm going to type in enable secret, let's just say Cisco, right, as my password. Now, if I can type it, I come back here and type in disable, and now when I go enable, it's going to ask me for the password before I'm able to get in there. The beauty of the enable secret is it automatically encrypts the password. It actually does something known as hashing, which is way better, at least in this case, than encryption. Because notice, this is known as encryption type 5 on a Cisco router versus the encryption type we just saw down here is type 7. Type 7 is Cracker Jack's encryption. Anything can break it. Type 5 is the very secure hashing encryption. A lot of people say, well, why don't they just use type 5 for everything? Well, it actually goes back to, historically speaking, it was very processor intense to do these hashes and all that kind of stuff. And they just kind of kept it the same for years to come. The truth is, the only way you're getting through this is by using a brute force attack, which is the most inefficient method that a hacker can use. It's just sitting there running processor cycles and trying different things to break through that. The other way that you can protect it is actually the old way. It's still supported on just about every Cisco device. It is the enable password. Same exact function, so I would type in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in this case, and it will be stored in the running config. The difference is it's clear text. Now, a lot of people will see, okay, there's two of them in there. Well, clear text, I turned on service password encryption with you a moment ago, so it at least encrypts it with the Cracker Jack's encryption, but that's not secure at all. If you have both type in there, it does not take both. It only will use the enable secret. So if I go back here, and I know you'll have to trust me as I do this, if I type in disable, type in enable, I can type 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which is my enable password. It's not going to take it as long as there's a enable secret. It's only going to take Cisco, which I just typed in there. Now, if I go in there and say no enable secret, then the enable password is still around, so I can do disable and enable. It's still prompting me, but now I have to use 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and that's what gets me into the device. Why have to? I know, the big why. Historic. That's the only reason this one's still around. A lot of times people copy and paste configs in from long ago, and enable password's the only one that's in there, so Cisco just kept the other one around. It'll be good for you to know it exists, but only use the enable secret. Finally, it wouldn't be right for us to move on without saving the configuration. Copy, run, start, and commit that base configuration to memory, or the quick way, just WR from the prompt. So let's put it all together. You get a fresh switch or router out of the box. You want to come in, set the host name, set a banner, turn on logging synchronous so the console messages don't interrupt your typing. Set a password if you'd like to on the console port, but definitely set a telnet/SSH password on those VTY lines. Give it an IP address so you can reach it remotely, and we'll talk a lot more about that when we get into the network design and setup. No IP domain lookup, so those mistyped commands aren't interpreted by the router as a telnet session to another device. Service password encryption to hide those clear text passwords. Enable password, but more importantly, enable secret to protect your transition from user mode to privilege mode. And finally, saving your configuration. That should be done on just about every device when you pull it out of the box. Your task is to take this and begin doing it. Run through, write notes. What do each one of these do? As I mentioned, run through this nugget 3 times so that you can start embedding these commands and, more importantly, getting used to navigating and where these commands go in the iOS. My goal for you is I would like for you to be able to do any one of these tasks on demand. So if a test scenario came up where somebody said, hey, set the hostname on the router. I'd like you to be able to log in, get into the privilege mode, global config, set the hostname all by yourself. I'd like you to be able to set an IP address on a router, get in, change the passwords of a device. So yes, this makes an awesome base configuration, but I'd like for you to be able to do any one of these tasks out of the gate. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.